a moment think that the price is indicative of value. It's not. It's what you decided to charge and what your tolerance is. What marketplace do you want to be in? So try to think of pricing as where do I want to be? It's not actually the true value, because I really think my clients selling for 6 are providing a product worth 40 to some people. But it's just a matter of who do you want to work with? Who do you want to be friends with? Who do you want to be with 300 of for the rest of the next 10 years? And if you like those folks in the private jet, they'll hang out with you and pay you. That's fine. If that kind of disgusts you, that's not attractive to you, you don't got to do that. You can be over here. And I highly recommend, if you're over here with the people, make sure your practice model is employer fundable, because that gives you the opportunity to let the employer pay 100% of your fees. So if you want to do equity, and I hope you do, yay for you. And I like you over here need to do that. You need to make it employer fundable or pre-tax funds fundable to make it as affordable as possible to the most amount of people.
Well, and I love
the moment thing.
This is produced by Concierge Medicine Today, LLC. All rights reserved. Concierge Medicine Today, or CMT, was founded in 2007 and serves as the industry's trade publication and annual medical conference organizer. Please note, the information shared on this podcast and across all CMT platforms is intended for general informational purposes only and may contain errors or omissions. Nothing in this podcast nor across CMT platforms constitutes medical, financial, legal, nor professional advice, and CMT is not liable for any inaccuracies. CMT encourages listeners to conduct their own research and consult trusted advisors before taking any action based on the content presented. No mention, interview, or link should be considered an endorsement. This content is primarily intended for a healthcare audience and may not apply to all listeners. Thanks for tuning in.
Well, good morning or good evening, DocPreneur Nation. You're listening to the Concierge Medicine Today's DocPreneur Leadership Podcast. And today we have an old friend, a wonderful expert in the space, a legal eagle. I don't know if attorneys love to be called legal eagles based on the movie from a long time ago, but talk about somebody who's so open-minded, such a legal expert, and understands the subscription and kind of healthcare delivery options that physicians have that are in a career transition. We have Jim Eischen. You're an attorney. Thank you for being with us.
Well, Michael, thank you very much for your introduction. I've been in the cash healthcare space for 15 years, and I think for almost all of those 15 years, you and I have known each other, and on some way or another, we've worked together. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, and I have a couple of things that you're probably going to be surprised that I documented that you said, because here at CMT, we're kind of like documenting the space of healthcare and the unique spaces. Yeah. So a couple of things you said years and years ago. I'm going to go back all the way back to April. I know I can get specific. April of 2015. Okay. You said one thing that really resonated, I think, with so many out there is let's focus on substance, not labels. And I love another quote that you did not say, but this came from a leadership author, and he said, look, if you have the only hot dog in town, your hot dogs don't even have to be that good. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today is hot dogs and healthcare, and you're going to see the correlation in just a minute. So before we jump in, tell us a little bit about what you do on a day-to-day basis for doctors.
Thank you. So for the last 15 years, the vast majority of my legal work has involved helping healthcare professionals around the country organize, document, and start cash healthcare practices. And I've done this work not only for individual healthcare professionals, but for larger provider networks such as University of Miami Healthcare System. At the time, they were the Carolinas Healthcare System. They're now Atrium. And more recently, Intermountain Health of Utah. And so everything we talk about today, Michael, is peer reviewed in the sense that really good healthcare attorneys for very large healthcare systems with whom I have worked with have, viewed my analysis, understand what we're talking about, and concur. And I write the chapter for the California Medical Association Physician Legal Desk Book on cash healthcare compliance. So I've always taken a very academic approach to whatever I do. It's kind of just the way my brain's wired. I like to know why. It's not good enough for someone to tell me that's how it is. I want to know why it is. So I've spent 15 years wondering why some practices thrive, why some don't, why certain labels seem to be a little more effective than others. What's that about? And what exactly is concierge medicine after all? So
Yeah.
it's taken me a long time to get to what we'll talk about today, but I've done my homework. And so now I'm ready to give a report.
Well,
We'll
before we
talk
jump
about it.
into I'm Midwestern, so before we jump into the meat and potatoes of the
Yep.
history of the subscription healthcare delivery space and
Yep.
executive healthcare and all these things,
Yep.
let's talk about the terminology and the models out there under the
Yeah.
subscription or executive or memberships, because I've heard it all. You've probably heard it all. We're probably the two people in the space that understand, like, we've heard it, everything. I think my favorite was wealth care. So, but you got membership medicine, retainer-based medicine, fee for care, which is different than fee for service. You've
Yeah.
got DPC, you've got membership medicine, cash-only
Yeah.
care, personalized care, bespoke care. So let's zero in on the most important, most common models and how many doctors are in those models uniquely that
Mm.
you estimate, because there is no federal registry or database because
Mm.
it's not a licensed specialty, it's a business model. And so that's kind of one of
Yeah.
the things the media keeps asking about. Hey, how big is it? How many are there? And it's difficult to equate, right?
Right. And so you asked such a good question, and I'm going to try to give short, blunt answers. So none of those labels mean anything. In other words, none of the labels you rattled off have any like logical connection to a predictable pattern or program or approach to medicine. They're brand names, and they attract certain people, and certain people like that brand name and assemble around it like a tribe. So there are definitely DPC tribes and there are concierge tribes, but not all the DPC practices are exactly the same. And not all the concierge practices are exactly the same. And not all the executive health practices are exactly the same. And there's wide diversity in integrative functional medicine. When the word is used, membership or subscription, at least we know what the cost charge is structured as. So it's not a bad way to refer to it. I think that has a connection to reality. But other than the word subscription or membership, once you go into the tribes, you really don't know what you're talking about in a sense, because there can be so many variations of how they approach the product or the space or how they organize their business that it's just not meaningful. So, what I want to know when I talk to a healthcare professional in the space is, are you in Medicare or not? Are you in network or not? What are you selling for cash exactly? And how do you charge? And once I know those answers, I have a sense of what I'm working with and what they think they're selling. But sort of stepping back, there's so much confusion in US healthcare, and cash healthcare is a subset. There's so much confusion that people really don't know exactly what they're talking about when even in the cash healthcare space, when they talk about what are they selling, and to this point, I think because of that insecurity and fear that maybe they're doing something wrong, there has been a gross underreporting of how many healthcare professionals are actually charging cash for subscription type services or cash for healthcare services in general. And so the number that you hear bandied about, I'd say there's probably 2,500 practices that fall into two very, very specific tribal categories. Tribal category number one, MDVIP and their competitors are a group of typically labeled concierge practice models. And there's another label, DPC, and there's that tribe. And so when you take those two together, my estimate would be maybe no more than 3,000 practices in the country fit into those two tribal categories. I actually think there's somewhere between 20 and 40,000 healthcare professionals in the US engaged in some version of cash healthcare outside of the traditional insurance network system.
And that would be some cash, like just, fee for care, right? Or there's
Right.
also maybe some subscriptions in there or memberships that are either monthly or annually or whatever, how they want to structure them.
Well, but let's talk to another confusion, and it is an elephant in the room, and it goes like this. The entire US healthcare system is a cash healthcare system. Okay. Let's just be honest. So when you look at Medicare, it's 80-20 coverage, which means it's a 20% cash product. We don't think of it that way, but Medicare is a cash healthcare product. It's 80% coverage, 20% good luck. And then we insure around that with Medicare replacement or Medicare Advantage or Medigap. And there's other ways to do that too. But even when we use insurance, Michael, we know as Americans that that's also triggering cash. Every time I see a doctor, I get a bill. Okay. It's not like I don't get a bill because insurance covered everything sometimes, but not often. And I usually don't know what that bill's going to be. So the bill could be $100, it could be $25, it could be $700. And I have no way of knowing, and I have no recourse. So once I get that bill, they are going to pursue me till the end of time unless I pay that bill. And if I try to dispute it, good luck, because they're not really interested in your, issues. So I've tried myself to fight preventative exam because they're not supposed to have out-of-pocket costs. Lost it every time. Like, just end up writing a check because I got exhausted. So biggest confusion of all, we're talking about a cash healthcare system already. So then the question is, how do you differentiate between all of the cash we already pay anyway and these cash practices who also charge cash, but for different things? And so that's why I get back to my first question to you, or my first sort of algorithm is I need to understand what their network experience is. Are they in or out of network? And then what are they charging cash for? Because let's face it, American healthcare is cash healthcare.
Yeah. Wow.
It is.
Well, I want to go back to, thank you for that kind of clarity around the terminology. And we're going to dive into a little bit more terminology.
I don't know if you
here
think that's clear. I don't think it's clear at all.
Well,
But, thank you.
I could zoom out, and I'm with that. And I have, we all have the benefit of rewind here, so we can go back and make sense of that. But I think when we zoom out, there's a history to this space, and it goes back further than just 20, 30 years to the mid 90s or the early 2000s. So
Yes.
give us a brief history, if it's possible, because we could talk all day about this.
I talk about this every day, Michael, because I do projects all over the country, and I orient every incoming professional who wants me to help them create a cash practice with the same story. And I've worked really hard at shortening it. Here it goes. In 1913, before there's a single US healthcare insurance policy for healthcare in America, a practice came upon an idea and said, why don't we do routine exams? Instead of waiting for illness, what if we check people all year to see if they're healthy? Which means it's interactional, it's communicative, and it's not waiting for sickness to respond to it or react. It's getting ahead of the curve by doing it in advance. It was a great idea. It's about 1913 in terms of how old it is. So over 100 years old. And then the 20s, worker health experts experimented in America with a worker health model that went like this, same. Let's do routine exams on workers, annual and follow-up, we could say, to see how they're doing and get ahead of the injury curve, and maybe we can save money. So what ended up happening is that corporate America in the old labor versus capital debate of the 20s obviously didn't decide to give every worker this version of care, but they isolated it to the one person in their group who they couldn't afford to lose and was worth the investment in their mind, and was subject to health risks that were less obvious because they worked on a desk, the executive. So the executive got this routine exam model to keep them alive and functional for as long as possible. And it quietly thrived. Why do I say quietly? I say quietly because no one wants to explain to workers that they're being allowed to die, but the executive's getting this version of healthcare at the company's expense to keep them alive longer. Creates all sorts of tensions, right? So, and there was no interest in labor unions agitating for this. There was no interest in funding this for everybody. And so it got quiet. So it quietly thrived. And you and I, if we were alive in the 40s, 50s, and 60s and 70s, you and I may not have known anything about it unless we had a job that might have exposed us to it. And the odds of that were low, and it was a very small number. So in comes Medicare in 1965. And Medicare has a sentence in the Social Security Act that says routine exams are not covered by Medicare. Well, why did it say that? Like, what did that mean? Why would they put that in Medicare? Because they wanted executive health to be legal. Well, why do they want that? Well, because they basically treat the most powerful people in the country, if not the world. So they can actually change federal law. And so in 1996 and again in 2006, I believe that industry quietly modified federal law and the Social Security Act to make it crystal clear that routine exams, routine physicals, and routine checkups, and any services not based on medical necessity are excluded from Medicare coverage equals perfectly safe for cash healthcare in America, no concern whatsoever of Medicare assignment violation. Does anyone in this country know this? No, Michael, they don't, unless they talk to me. Because no one knows about these federal statutes. No one talks about them. Attorneys in healthcare don't even know they exist, which is a remarkable achievement, right? Like it's a very interesting thing how effectively executive healthcare has flown under our radar. And yet it's the basis of concierge medicine. Because in 1999, the first concierge model was a 100% ripoff. I mean, I don't say that in a bad way. It was a replication of the Cleveland Clinic executive health model, and that became concierge medicine. So now we fast forward to today. Maybe the real question is, are you selling routine exams or not? Because if you're selling routine exams, you are 100% safe under federal statute. You don't have to opt out of Medicare, and you can be a network and charge networks as little or as much as you want. But if you're selling something else, it's that something else that creates the uncertainty. Well, what is it? And there's so many theories. There's all sorts of different ideas about, well, what is it? Is it my cell phone number? Is it access to me? Is it access to time? What is it? But because of our historical factors over the last 100 years, we don't know what's in plain sight in front of our eyes, which is in federal statutes. It's routine exams. That's what we're selling. Well, put it this way. When we create the model correctly, in my opinion, we are 100% Medicare compliant when we sell routine exams. We're also implementing a 100-year-old theory that's a really great theory, which is get ahead of illness and connect with the patient better and improve outcomes by that interaction. So it's a great theory of treatment. It's viewed as very valuable in our culture because we view executives like, this is a very mercantile culture. So we tend to lionize executives, right? So I believe that when you frame the model correctly to follow its historical precedent, you actually increase consumer demand because they're like, oh, I know what that is. I think I know what that is. That's for important people. And yeah, I want that too, because I think I'm important. And then the final, one other thing, just really quick, Michael, I'm so sorry.
Please.
But part of privilege is you get to pay less taxes, right? Like, isn't that an American tradition? If we're really privileged, we pay less in taxes. So this model is fully tax enabled, and I'll explain. These fees are qualified medical expenses under the Internal Revenue Code, which means your HSA, FSA, HRA, and MSA funds, which are like in order, your own healthcare. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Okay. Okay. You didn't hear that ring?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So our own IRA, healthcare IRAs, our employer funded funds that are made available to us as an employee, FSA, HRA, and then Medicare's got a plan called MSA. Those are all fully enabled and available with this model. But most, if not all, virtually all Americans in healthcare, attorneys, consultants, experts, everything I just told you, they do not know. They don't know about the federal statutes. They don't know that history. They don't know exactly why we're doing what we're doing. And this is the confusion that causes it to be undercounted. So they're like, I don't know if this is legal. No, I'm not doing that. So there's like maybe 40,000 of these practices, and they don't really know what they're selling.
Yeah. Do you think that 40,000, I mean, I look at Zoomed Out, because I look at all things happening in subscriptions in healthcare.
Yeah.
So you've got,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember you and I talking in July or June of 2020, and we had talked it back in March of 2020 when everything happened and the world changed. And in July, we were like, did you see what some of these companies have done? It's like, yeah, I know. We've been wanting that for 20, 30 years. And it's like they flipped a switch within 2, 3, 4 months. The patients finally got a lot of virtual care. So my question is really more revolved around some of that 40,000 subscriptions or cash, whether it's just one-time transaction, does that include some of the virtual private care doctors or programs out there? Because that's a big sector in healthcare as well as the virtual visits.
I think one of the most critical cognitive dissonances in the human primate mind is this over categorization of reality. We just want to break things into pieces, right? And so we just feel more comfortable like thinking that not everything is connected, but everything is actually connected. So to this point, I don't know what virtual care is. It's just care. Okay. We've crossed that bridge. It's over. Like, in other words, we all meet online. We communicate through electronic means. It's kind of silly to call anything virtual care because care is virtual care. Like I have had plenty of interactions with my healthcare professionals with insurance, and it was virtual. And I don't even note it. In other words, for a consumer, this isn't anything that we notice. We just go, oh yeah, it's care. So to your point, yes, there are companies doing quote telemedicine or virtual care. And in my book, they're doing care and they're doing care for cash. So yes, they are part of that 40,000.
Okay. All right. It just helps me break it into pieces. I need to get like my wife said, stop overthinking it. I think I need to get a bracelet or a tattoo that says, don't overthink it. Right now,
Keep asking questions. That's a good thing.
So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about, now that we've talked about history and terminology, let's talk about, well, I don't want to overthink it, but a lot of doctors, when they're pursuing a career change, they're bumping into things and terminology like, well, you could go all cash. You could go no Medicare, no insurance. You could go hybrid. You could go segmented. You could go fee for care. You could go all these, whatever it might be. So help us understand, and make transition, my career transition, whether I'm because this is another problem, a hospitalist who owns the patients, and I want to do something different in my career, but I have zero patients.
Okay, that's a good question. Yeah, that's a really good question, Michael. Like, what do you do? How do you approach it? Okay, well, let's just kind of break it down and make it simple. Okay, the US healthcare system is a cash model. The end. Okay, so we're already in a cash ecosystem. The question is, what cash are you going to charge? Is it going to be out of networks and deductibles and copays? It's going to be outside of insurance. Is it going to be subscription or not subscription? Is it going to be fee for service or not for fee for service? But you ask an even better question, which is, well, how do I organize this? What do I do to actually like mentally prepare myself for self-employment potentially? Or maybe the other question would be, well, how do I start a business? I mean, because that's really what, in essence, what you're saying is, how do I start a business? And I will give you my answer, which is just my answer. So I've been an attorney for 38 years, and I have been self-employed. I've also been partners in big firms. I've also done real estate business. And because my work before healthcare was corporate and real estate, I have a high degree of exposure to capitalism and, mercantile business planning. I'm a business planning expert, basically. And what I'll tell you is, and it's in my slide deck, so this won't seem unfamiliar to you. You got to start with your own intentions. What do I want to do? Like, what do I feel like doing? That can be a very hard question because we're trained to sort of follow leaders. We're trained to follow instructions. We're trained to follow advice. So our impulse is to run around and ask 25 people, what do you think I should do? I understand that. But in my experience, to start a business, it has to be very personal. Like, what do I want to do? Like, what do I want to do with my day? What do I believe in? What do I think is really good? Now, you can approach it from a, I don't want to say selfish in a bad way, but you can say, well, what do I do to maximize my income? That's one question. Another question is, how do I make the world a better place? It's a different question. I think it needs a little bit of both. And I think if you slant toward making the world a better place, you seem like a nicer person. So I'm more likely to buy your product if I don't catch the vibe that you're trying to just make as much money from me as possible. Because I don't like that. When I'm a consumer, I don't really like that. But when I get from someone I'm buying something from that they believe in something, all art, with their heart and their mind, this is the way to do it. That's compelling to me. So I would recommend for any healthcare professional looking to create some version of self-employment or wants to create a practice model that attracts consumers, keep these things in mind. Consumers can smell a rat. Okay. So if your primary goal is maximizing your retirement account, which probably took a hit, I know mine did, with all the tariff upheaval and the stock markets. Don't imagine that no one knows that. Okay. Like they're going to kind of get that vibe from you, like it's instinctual. Whereas if you're really trying to think about how to make their health better and they discern that is your intent, I find those practices fill up very quickly. With, like with whatever they decide to do, that intention is everything. So in my book, really great business is about solving a big problem. The original President Bush, not the second one, but the first one, the dad, he gave I think it was a Harvard commencement speech. And this was something he talked about. He talked about pick a really important problem and solve it. And that stuck him. I did not go to Harvard. I saw this speech, online or on TV, but I thought, he's right. That is right. Pick a big problem and solve it. And so that's what I would say.
Yeah. Well, that is super helpful. And I think that there's a lot of mistakes being made when they're moving into, a career transition.
Yeah.
And, I'm kind of jumping around. I would like to go in order, but I want to make sure I don't miss these. But, okay, I need to work with somebody. Like it's not all or nothing. Like I think there's I just left the hospital. I have 0 patients. Or I'm going to get out of Medicare. I have to opt out every couple of years. And I'm going to get out of all insurance because I'm just tired of being controlled. And there's a very loud and vocal crowd of that. And that's fine. Everybody loves to complain. And I'm sure if I heard their story, I would be like, sure, yeah. You get a permission slip to complain. But that's not moving the needle forward. And I think that if you decide as a physician that I was talking with a doctor in Texas the other day, she said, I chose my 5 best payers. Like they aren't all bad, it's pros and cons, but I plan to offer cash and subscriptions and memberships, but I'm going to keep my other revenue stream going for a little while. And then maybe in a year, I'll get rid of 1 or 2 of them. And so I think that there's this concept or this myth out there that if you're going to move into subscription-based healthcare delivery, it's like all or nothing. You have to get rid of Medicare, get rid of insurance, and just do cash, which makes you, by the way, a bad salesperson because most of the people out there who are doing that are racing to the bottom. And I remember he's now a retired DPC doc, and he said, primary care, we have to stop seeing ourselves as the center of the universe and take some plays from the retail clinic playbook, regardless of how we feel about them. So let's talk a little bit about the problems of pricing too low, because as we talked about at the beginning, if you have the only hot dog stand in town, your hot dog doesn't even have to be that good. And hot dogs are cheap, right? They're one of the I love going to Costco's hot dogs, and they're amazing. But nonetheless, your hot dog doesn't even have to be that good. But you don't have to price yourself out of the market and say, well, I'm going to charge $40,000 per member per year. So talk to us a little bit about the pricing conundrum when it concerns a career transition.
Oh my God, there's so much to cover in that, and I want to cover it all. Let me try without talking too much. So one of the best pieces of career advice I got as a young attorney from an older attorney was, Jim, don't flee from something, go to something. I think a lot of healthcare professionals are making a mistake by fleeing insurance. It's reactive. In other words, you're just repelled by something that I agree with you is pretty terrible. Like all-time terrible. Like someday, 100 years from now, the US healthcare system is not going to be viewed kindly by historians. It will be viewed as having killed a lot of people for making a lot of profit. So I'm not here to defend that. I think it's terrible, okay? But in business, we try to train ourselves to think with like, I don't know where dry eye came from. Like, what? I guess we're not crying. I was just thinking about that euphemism, but it's like, to really just have a very cold, calculating look at things at times and not be overly emotional. So to me, when you talk about insurance and fleeing Medicare and fleeing insurance, that's not a good business plan. Okay, just to be honest. What's a good business plan is to tell me what you're doing and why. Okay, so what am I going to do? What am I attracted to? Which is why I am attracted to the historical model, because I'm attracted to it. I'm not fleeing something. I'm saying, no, that was a really good idea. We should do this. Okay, now pricing. I think this correlates. So when you don't have a clear sense of what you're really selling or why, it's quite natural to be price conscious. In other words, I'm not really special. I'm just a hot dog. Okay. And so if I'm not very special and I don't have any heart space going on here, I'm just like, well, there's a market and people like this and they'll buy it. So I'm going to sell it. Okay. In that kind of a marketplace, you're going to be very price conscious, but think about what you're communicating. What you're communicating to the consumer, which is what Costco tells you about that hot dog, is that, look, folks, this is not a special hot dog. It's just cheap. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you and I go to Costco and we see that hot dog and it's like $1.69 or whatever the hell it is with a soda, thanks. That's super healthy.
Yeah.
It's like, thanks Costco. But we're going to make it really cheap for you to die sooner. But, we're going to buy that. It's like, there it is. It's cheap. That's all that's going on. And the only reason that you and I buy it is because it's the only hot dog within a mile of us. It's right there. So it's the hot dog that's your story about, the only hot dog in town. It's the only hot dog in town. I think of the hot dogs in gas stations the same way. You roll into a gas station, you're kind of hungry. You look around at like 50,000 different versions of Doritos or potato chips. You look at 20,000 versions of nuts and you kind of want protein. Well, there's the hot dog.
There's the roller cart. My father-in-law loved, like, my son was like, hey, where do you want to go eat? And my son said, QT. And my grandfather or my father-in-law was like, Matt, are you serious? Like, that's not your birthday meal.
But see, this gets into the cognitive. I'm really a big fan of cognitive distortions. I just kind of roll around in it. It makes me happy. It's almost like dark humor, but we're all about, we miss the mark and we miss it all the time, especially economically. Just ask Danny Kahneman or Amos Tversky. They won the Nobel Peace Prize for proving conclusively that actually people aren't rational with money, which changed an economic tenet of economics theory. Okay, so when you market based on price, you are downgrading your brand. You are saying, I'm a Costco or a gas station hot dog. I just happen to be cheaper than the other hot dog, and I'm right here. So you should just buy this hot dog. We're not teaching consumers to value the true worth of this model at all. But there's another thing that happens. You have a whole, like, let's go back to that 3,000 out of 40,000 that I mentioned. That 3,000 markets like a hot dog, okay? Like, no offense to the hot dog sellers. I love you, okay? But you're putting online your pricing and your price marketing. So you're connoting a very different value proposition than the rest of the cash healthcare ecosystem. Because if you get outside of that hot dog stand, those prices are more like $3 to $50,000 a year. But if you go online and your only source of information is what you go tap, 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 I'm going to Google, Safari, Firefox, this, whatever you use. And then you look for pricing. I'm telling you, you're only finding hot dogs because it's only the hot dog sellers who market the hot dog price, because the people who don't want to sell price are trying to sell value. And so they want to achieve a higher price point. And to do so, they can't act like it's a Costco hot dog. They've got to basically present it as a far more valuable product. And they do. So that's why we talked about hot dogs, because Michael and I offline, we've had this conversation. And I tell my clients, God, don't be a hot dog seller. Like, don't be the gas station hot dog. Like, You know, you don't have to market your price. Make your price market value. What is the market? Well, it's not that. That's a different market. That's the hot dog market. When you get out of the hot dog market, it's not a hot dog anymore. I don't know what it is. It's a Chicago dog with
Yeah.
chili.
I can get sauerkraut on that Costco hot dog,
There
by
you
the
go.
way.
Well, I'm glad you upgraded.
And if you have it with carbonated water, a friend of mine said it tastes just like a beer at a bratwurst. And I was like, that's a pretty far stretch, but
Dude,
I'll take it, you know.
whatever it takes to be healthy. So that's the
Yeah.
hot dog analogy. Don't be a hot dog.
So two things on that, and these are more commentaries that you can riff on. First of all, well, if I'm not a very good. I was talking with a doctor a couple weeks ago, and over an hour and a half, 2 hours later, the message I was trying to convey was, you're worth more than you think you are. Stop believing the lie that you were told because you were treated like you were 6 inches tall in medical school, that you have to be everything for everybody at all times and wear that badge of making no money like it's a badge of honor, because that's not the doctor I want to go see as your patient. And that's not a sustainable life for you. You know, you'll end up being a florist, you know, and that's happened. But then, okay, so it's hard to go past that mindset, which is what I've been really struggling with, to try and bring physicians into this side of like,
Yeah.
you're worth more than you think you are. Stop undervaluing yourself.
Yeah.
But then there's also the other side that says, well, I'm no Medicare, no insurance, and I really am not a very good business person, and I raced to the bottom. I couldn't make that work. I'm not a very good salesman or saleswoman, and that price point, I like it. I'm comfortable with it because I think that I'm worth 45 or 85 per member per month. So, you know what? Why don't I just go after some employers? And, you know, it's like, well, there's this thought of like, well, if I go after 145 employers and take that same amount of education, you know, you're not going to get all 145 employees. You might get 4 or 14 if you're lucky, right? So talk to us a little bit about the mindset and then the employer side.
That's such a good question. And there's multiple layers in it. So let me go to the first layer for me, which is, what are you selling? So where I think people fall off the ledge is they think they're selling a pre-printed sort of uniform product. But like we talked about in the beginning of this conversation, there's no such thing. Those words don't really mean anything. So they don't connote anything in particular. This is why it's so important for a healthcare professional to decide what they're really selling. Because when they do that, Michael, they don't race to the bottom, because they're not selling a commodity. They're selling a relationship. And a relationship is with a person, me, the doctor, or whoever, nurse practitioner, PA, whatever I am. Do you? It's me. So who am I? That's the question. Kind of a tough question, but that's, what do I believe in and what do I want to do? So then once I discern what that is, whatever that is, then the question is, how do I sell this to the most likely consumer in this space, right? Like, I'm not a good salesperson, like you said. I don't really know business. I'm not sure how to do this. No one I talk to gives me uniform advice. And I'm really sorry about that. It's true. Every advice you're getting is probably really bad, you know, in this space, because most people have no idea how it works or why. So here's my point, and I don't mean to be repetitive, but that's the beauty of the model I'm telling you should adopt, because this structure is tax advantaged. So maybe your issue is, but I don't want to just be for the rich. And I've heard lots of healthcare professionals tell me that. They're like, Jim, look, okay, no offense to rich people, but I kind of want to work with normal people. And I tell them, you can price whatever you want. You know, you don't have to charge $12,000. You don't have to charge $40,000. You can charge whatever you want, but just understand what it is that you're selling. What is it? And then figure out how to package that and what it is. But you cannot figure out price until you know what the product is, right? How do you do a business plan if you don't know the product? You don't. Okay.
Well, what if I met at a conference and somebody just said, well, scribble what you want to make on the back of a napkin and then back into it from there? True story.
No, that's MDVIP. So in other words, when the
I wouldn't say that, but
I don't say that pejoratively, but Michael, it's true. But it's also true that started with the vision. So the venture capitalist of MDVIP asked the doctor of MDVIP, what is your dream? What do you want to do so you don't feel burned out? And he said, I want to do the Cleveland Clinic executive health model. And then the venture capitalist did the math for that to figure out how to do it. That's what I do every day. I do the same thing that venture capitalist does, Michael. I ask people, what do you want to do? And then we back into it. And we go, okay, all right, well, that's what you want to do. Well, here's the market for that. Here's how we could package it. And here's how we could price it. And I want to talk about this employer funding issue because this is vital. You cannot get to employer funding with your reaction against insurance. You will never get there. You think you're going to get there. You've been trying for 20 years. You're not there, and you probably won't ever get there. And the reason for that is because once you adopt that mindset and you take that model, you have disqualified yourself with the IRS under current law from being a qualified medical expense, which is why I say don't do that. So if you use the model or the formula, you don't have to use the word executive. I never use that word. I don't use concierge either because neither word is all that helpful. But if whatever word you use doesn't matter to me, it should be a word that connotes you. But the structure, if you follow the structure of the executive health model, which is 3 federal statutes and decades of Medicare guidance, so it's not like we're making it up. Go look it up yourself. That is a qualified medical expense, which means, hey, you can do some equity. You can go to that local employer and offer to put together a practice model. And who knows what you do? You might have your own practice and just have them pay for it using FSA and HRA funds or direct funding like they do in executive health. Or you might actually even have them help you set this up. And you can do a version of this care for a company. And who knows how many people you take care of. And you might be more than reasonably compensated and be part of a aligned structure that's like an MSO model with an employer and do routine care for their employees. Yay. Nothing has to change for that to work. We don't need to lobby. We don't need to change any laws, federal or state. All the laws are in place for you. You just don't want to get in that car. But that car is sitting there with the key in it.
Yeah, I think that tension that you were discussing there was, we see that somewhat in DPC, where it's this extreme tension towards insurance and Medicare, and there's an opt-out, no we're just cash, but we're a low primary care subscription, but then we want to work with employers because we're not really great at selling ourselves to our local community. And I think some of the doctors in DPC are amazing. Like
I do too.
They have charisma, but those are the charismatic ones. They got a personality, and that sells. It's like, and no wonder their practice is full and they got a waiting list.
I hope that for them. Like I really like the DPC healthcare professionals. They're wonderful people. I just think they could improve their approach. Okay, like from a business perspective. In other words, I don't think you have to opt out of Medicare. And when I was more involved in DPC formation and presentations, I would often ask the question, why are we opting out of Medicare? And the answer I would get was basically because we just don't want to violate those laws. We want to do medicine our way. We're just not comfortable. And I remember kind of laying out to them the Medicare compliance footprint that so many other practices use and don't opt out of Medicare. And they just couldn't get comfortable. They're like, Jim, I hear you, but it just sounds like magic. It sounds like alchemy. It's like you're turning lead into gold, and I don't believe in that. And they really helped me a lot because their skepticism is what caused me to dive deeper and find all this history and really find and pull out and show people the federal statutes and show people the Medicare guidance that has been published for decades. It's not alchemy. It's really basic. It's super basic. It's like lighting a match,
And I think if you're listening, I mean, for the folks listening here, I think the model that I think that is, there's no wrong way, but there's, right pathways to learn. And I think Jim has dropped a lot of lanterns for you to pick up along your path to light the way towards a routine care, a routine cash practice that, is going to be helpful. And we're going to put the links to Jim's website as well as how to connect with him in the show notes below. But a couple of more questions because I know we're running on our timeline here. But I want to make sure we jump on these because these are some of the physician inquiries we get a lot of this. You know, I'm trying to follow a process here of, okay, I've made a decision. I want to do like a routine cash only care, but I may participate in Medicare. I may do the routine executive type of thing.
Mhm.
However, I've been I've been taught and instructed, and it's maybe a cognitive bias or whatever, however you want to define it. I have a mindset of I can't market, and I'm as there's so many rules on physicians, what they can and can't do, and you don't want to sell access, but
Right.
it's so marketing mistakes 101. What's some of the things that you see that's like, just don't do that?
Oh, I love this question. Okay. First of all, be very clear in your mind that routine care means sickness and prevention. So this is a mental trap. You guys will hear this and go, but what if someone's sick? Isn't that covered? No, it's not covered. So the routine exam model, or put it another way, the executive health model that has thrived for 100 years in America has been treating sickness, writing prescription, doing DME, you know, has been actually treating sickness for 100 years, and it works really well. So don't for a second imagine that routine exam equals preventative type physicals and then go ahead, scoot, and then if you're sick, oh, it's something different. No, it's not different at all. So that's issue number one. Issue number two, marketing mistakes, is they follow the classic concierge model, Michael, and they look online and they see what everyone else is doing. And what they're trained in med school is be in the collegial norm, be within the standard of care. Don't put your neck out. Don't be Linus Pauling and talk about how many thousands of cc's of vitamin C. Okay. Pull it together, check in, stay with the crowd. And so, because of that mindset, which I don't entirely disagree with, but it leads to some things. So you're going to look online and then you're going to replicate marketing. Two things. One, most of that marketing is not good marketing. It's just not effective. From just a big picture, like, am I attracting patients? It's not. Okay. That's not what they're looking for, but you're doing it because everyone else is doing it. Same in next day appointments, extra time with your doctor. Okay. Like, those aren't bad things. Those are cool. But in the end of the day, what I see filling up practices, that's not what's filling up the practice. It's the person. It's that relationship, and it's word of mouth is what's really happening. So you could be the worst marketer on the planet, but if you're a really great doctor, got good news for you. Just start doing it and you're going to grow to full, because you don't have to be a good marketer. You really don't. But marketing mistakes. So not understanding the routine exam equals both sick and well care. Number two, replicating typical concierge marketing, like same and next day appointments and extra time with your doctor. Okay, there's no magic to that. Okay, it's not that great. It's not making people go, gosh darn it, I'm going to buy that hot dog.
It's a platitude now. Like, I mean, platitudes
doesn't
are our
matter.
marketing thing. Yeah.
So third mistake, I tell my clients, 80% of your marketing should be about you and your vision of better care and what care should be like. 20%, and by the way, at the end, not at the beginning, is about I'm a subscription model, and if you want more information, blah, 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 blah. These guys don't usually do that. They want to like launch into I'm a concierge practice and you get same and next day appointments and we're $2,500 and blah, 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 blah. And that is not good marketing. Okay. What's good marketing is I want to know who you are. Do you like to parasail? I mean, did you climb a mountain? I mean, do you have a hobby? Like, where did you go to school, or what's part of your life journey? Did you have a sickness yourself that you overcame? And maybe, or did you have a family member who did? And what inspired you to go to med school? What do you like about treating people? Why do you like to care for people's health? That's because you're the product. Okay. I'm not the product. And Michael, you're not the product. And the word concierge is not the product. And the word DPC is not the product. That's not a good product. The product is you. Like, what are you about? What are this, which is why I don't believe in brand marketing. So it's not a hot dog at Costco. It's you. You're not a hot dog. So tell me about you, not hot dog. What are you about? Because that's what's going to cause me to want to subscribe to your practice. And that's the only thing that will make me want to subscribe. Nothing else. Don't talk to me about your price. Don't talk to me about same and next day appointments and extra time with your doctor. How do I know I want extra time with you? I don't know you. Like, who are you? But see, if you show me who you are on your website and just the way you are, and if you're engaging and warm and friendly, and I love that you can't market. Great. You're not slimy. You're not like a con artist. I love that. That's great. You're going to do great. Just start and realize that you are the product. Even if you're an introvert, great. You're an introvert. That means you get these deep conversations with one person for 2 hours. That's a wonderful person. You don't have to be an extrovert. Okay. So that's the biggest mistakes I see in cash marketing. They don't know why they're doing it. And then they don't understand this model, routine exams. And then even if they do understand it, they have in their brain that that's not really what I'm selling. And they don't seem to think sick care is part of that. It is. And then they get into this typical concierge marketing spiel that it's just too old. Okay. Like, how about this as being very simple common sense? If you see it everywhere on the internet, it's not special. Okay. So it's not special.
Well, and it's happening in the hot dog stands of primary care as well, with the low cost subscriptions.
It connects with that. Yes.
Yeah.
And so,
and we can't, one of my favorite authors, he always says, look, when you have a heart for your community, you don't have to compete on price. You can charge whatever you want. And without community, you're just a commodity. And I think it was, she's a concierge doctor in Florida. And she said, I give all this advice to all the young students and residents I talk to. She's like, whatever specialty, whatever model you're going to go into, it's 4 words. I'm just counting to make sure I was right. Don't be a jerk. And like, if there's anything that you take away from the marketing conversation, like, I'm not going to keep going to give you the money out of my wallet or my MSA or HSA, or, I'm not going to keep giving you money if you're not respecting me as a patient, if you're not respecting my kids, and part of that respect comes as well with some form of experience in hospitality. I'm not saying that you have to have, new drapes or new fresh flowers in the hallways, but I'm saying be a little bit different. I look at from the public relations perspective of zooming out. I look at concierge medicine as a bit of a brand over the years, and seeing how it's moved and innovated, and it has all these different, branches off of the family tree of membership medicine trunk. And I see that, there was probably public relations resistance to aesthetics and plastic surgery early on. And so I went and interviewed plastic surgeons and aesthetics, and they're like, oh yeah, early on, we were all about vanity, very similar to that. And then I think that there's we're serving the community. We're doing the right thing by offering, $85 per member per month, or we're doing the right thing by offering $40 per member per month. We're fighting the good fight. And I don't know if we're going to be able to keep the lights on tomorrow, but our hot dog is decent, but then there's also that erosion that, you don't want to erode people's trust in the population of physicians and healthcare providers. Well, that went away with COVID, right? Like, I think we've all seen, and it's been around for decades, probably before that too, that people can recite and remember, that we've lost trust in a lot of our healthcare institutions and providers in general, regardless if you want to call them providers. There's a whole debate on that. But then we've lost trust in our healthcare marketplace. And so we need to rebuild that trust. And I think that that's the whole purpose of our conversation, and saying, look, you have pathways to go to, you have entry points that you can explore, and routine care, routine memberships, exams, executive health models type structures in your practice. They don't have to always involve, opting out of Medicare, opting out of insurance. And that's one of the reasons why I've enjoyed this conversation today, because, you have to be open-minded and understand that, there's different ways to do this. There's not just one way. So if you want to riff on that for a moment, I have a couple more questions for you before we depart.
Yeah, I just think you did a really good job with that, Michael. I agree with you. I want to speak to the Medicare opt-out very granularly. It was a very common anecdotal advice given for decades, and it was defensive lawyering, or perhaps somewhat fearful, and it was indicative of an overall insecurity for lack of awareness. They literally didn't know about those three statutes. Let's just make it very simple. Everyone who told you that did not know that federal law enables cash healthcare in a specific way. They just didn't know. So we don't blame them. But, for Medicare opt-outs, here's my fear. When you opt out of Medicare, you promise the federal government that you will not sign up a patient with an immediate, urgent, or emergent condition. That is not permitted. That's a Medicare assignment violation. So it's a little ironic that you opt out to avoid violating Medicare, and yet you're stepping into a footprint which you probably are violating Medicare all the time. It also says and requires of you that you not charge cash for urgent or emergent care, because that's covered by you, the opted out professional. When you do that, you can't charge cash for that. And yet, very commonly among particularly family practice physicians, they are doing that. So here's my fear. I love those folks. I want them to be safe. But my concern is the American healthcare system is going to continue to erode without significant reform. And since there's a lack of political will, a lack of clarity of thought, a lack of historical honesty, all of those things are conspiring to the force vectors all pointing downward. So in 3 years, someone's got to be blamed. Well, Michael, who am I afraid they're going to blame? The doctors. Okay, so how would it go? It would go like this. They would say, well, why is there a healthcare professional shortage? Well, it could be all those healthcare professionals opting out of Medicare. And in the past, they've never been able to track that because every Medicare, oversight company is separate and their data doesn't track each other. So the GAO has never been able to figure out how many opted out healthcare professionals are there. But guess what? AI. So in the next 3 years, here's what's going to happen, in my opinion. AI is going to help the federal government figure out where are all those opted out professionals, because we want to blame them for the provider shortage. And then they're going to send out these RAC audits, and the RAC audits are going to deal with three things. Are you selling urgent or emergent care for cash? Are you signing up a patient with an urgent or emergent condition? And are you using that mandatory addendum we told you have to use? In my opinion, I want to be fair. At least 2/3 of all opted out professionals will violate one of those. And it's more like 90% are going to be violating. And then bad things are going to happen. Okay. And then they're going to make it impossible to stay opted out. So is this going to happen for sure? I don't know. But it seems very probable to me because no one's honest about the real problems with US healthcare. We always try to find a scapegoat. Executive health will never be blamed for anything. It will never be prosecuted for anything, and it will never have a problem because they know too many really high-powered people. So they're too well connected. That's the way this country works. Those folks are not going to get prosecuted, all right? So everyone driving that car is perfectly fine, in my opinion. But over here, these really nice people who are salt of the earth and follow this folksy advice and just want to do good for people, they're going to get screwed. They're going to be the scapegoats because they have no lobbyist. They are protected. They're not rich. I mean, by definition, they're not rich. I mean, look at what we're talking about. So they're going to get screwed. And that's my fear. So what I like to tell healthcare professionals, please don't opt out of Medicare. I don't want you to bill Medicare. I don't care if you ever bill Medicare, but you don't have to bill Medicare. You don't have to bill plans, but don't opt out of Medicare. Do a model that safely charges cash for things Medicare doesn't cover. Call it a day and don't ever bill Medicare again. God bless you. Don't ever bill Medicare again. I don't care if you ever care about Medicare again. You don't care about Medicare. I don't care about Medicare. We're fine. Okay. It's not controlling you. Okay. You don't have handcuffs on, but I'm warning you, there is a point in time in this country where they're going to look for a scapegoat for why there's a provider shortage. Concierge and high-level care is going to come to their minds, right? we just saw an article in Kaiser Foundation today out of, I forget what state, but they did an article on rural concierge medicine. And it's evidencing everything we're talking about, Michael. They didn't even know who they were talking to. So they called it concierge, then they talked to a DPC doctor and they said it was direct care. And then they said, what is it for? And they basically said you pay a fee for membership, like it's an access fee. I mean, no real insight into what's really going on here. And they were really talking to the lower fee people anyway. And then yet in the article, the journalist talked about, but this could be a contributing factor to the provider shortage. Okay, you need to see this coming. See this coming. That they're not going to go blame Cleveland Clinic. There's not going to be any like riots over in Ohio. Okay, they're not going to go storm Mayo Longevity Clinic in Florida. There's not going to be any pitchforks or torches. Okay, they're going to go after little normal people. That's what happens, which is sad but true. And the little normal people will be opted out of Medicare, unintentionally violating Medicare assignment, caught, and then bad things will happen. So
how do you protect yourself? I mean, we're not giving legal advice on this, but obviously contact a professional like yourself. We'll put the links of how to connect with you, but what should a doctor do listening to that to be like, well, I don't want to get, we're not saying that's going to happen, but that that's what you do. I mean, having a protection conversation, doctors seem to be very averse to risk, and they undervalue themselves. So they want to protect themselves. So how do they do that?
Okay, that's a good question. So, okay, let's say you have a practice right now and you've opted out of Medicare. Maybe you branded it DPC, maybe you didn't. I'm not suggesting you change anything, but really two things. Your patient agreement and your marketing. So, and I would look at when you can opt back into Medicare. There's a window and it's a rolling window, or just ask to be opted back in. Again, I want to make it very clear. I am not asking you to bill Medicare, nor am I indicating that you have to bill Medicare. You do not. But if all you do is just take your existing price points and your wonderful patients, and you simply slightly edit your patient agreement and your marketing to conform more to this routine exam structure, which after all was the beginning of it all anyway. This was what relationship cash healthcare has always been in America. It's not new. This isn't a newfangled idea. This is an old-fangled idea, okay? It's 100 years old, okay? It's been around for so long. It's older than you are, okay? So if you're feeling kind of weird about it, it's your elder. Your elder is telling you how to do this right. And it's in plain sight. 3 federal statutes, decades of Medicare guidance. There it is. So that's what you should do. You should try to reconnect with why you're doing this, okay? And decide how you want to live, whatever that is. And then, modify your marketing and patient agreement accordingly. You can be Medicare compliant without being in Medicare. So you can adopt the model that lets you freely get employer funding today and still be out of Medicare. Doesn't matter. And then I'd get back into Medicare, but I wouldn't bill Medicare. If you don't want to bill Medicare, don't bill Medicare. But see, I don't want you to be that number. Like in 3 years, when they look for, well, who's causing the provider shortage? What you want to do is be driving the exact same car that Cleveland Clinic drives. You're not going to call it that. It's not Cleveland Clinic Executive Health. It's not Executive Health. Call it whatever you want. Call it watermelon. Call it grapes. Call it forks and knives. I don't care what you call it. But, that model's not going to get attacked, okay? It just never will. It's too old. It's too protected. It's protected by federal statute. Why don't you crawl into that shelter? It's a really good shelter. You're not going to get cold. You're going to be protected.
That's a great shelter for.
It's right there, okay? And you can call yourself, if you want to call yourself DPC, it's fine. It's not helpful with the tax position. I'd wish you'd call yourself you. And you can, in your marketing, say, this is a DPC style practice. We're for the people. We're doing essential primary care. Yeah, that's cool. That you're a good person, okay? It's just be clever about it, right? Put yourself in that shelter,
or you see them do it both. You're like, hey, I'm a concierge doctor, but it's also called direct care. So I kind of do both. So I'm kind of appealing to both audiences, but I can't, but I haven't really figured out my spot. Like, am I the guy who got out of the Mercedes on the street, or am I going to go over to to work at the hot dog stand? I just
You
don't know
can
yet.
be hot dog vibe and have the right structure. Okay. In other words, you don't have to be rich person vibe. You can be regular person vibe. I'm going to make it very simple. If an employer receives a request for FSA funding, they ask, what's it for? If it says DPC or concierge, the answer is no. Okay. Because the IRS has already said formally in the regs that DPC is not a qualified medical expense. Now they are trying their asses off to, pardon my French, they've been working on this for a long time to change
long
that
time.
law. Will they change it? Don't know. Is it changed yet? No, it's not. So as of today, if you're working with an employer and they see DPC, no, FSA, no funding. If they see the word concierge, it's probably no, which is why you see no employer funding of concierge in America. Do you see any? I don't. I don't see it. Don't hear. Well, this is why. Okay. So those two words are a bit toxic to this equity solution of employer funding. So we just have to be honest about that. I mean, I like DPC and I like concierge, but they're not good words for a medical expense. All right. So, but if I don't need to see executive health, but I'm going to tell you what I do need to see. I need to see examinations. That's the word. So if you go to IRS publication 502, which describes qualified medical expenses, they say a physician examination, whether needed or not, diagnostic, is a qualified medical expense. There you go. So you know the words. Those are the words. That's why when we talked about this, I said routine exam. Exam is an important word because if I'm an FSA coordinator and I see, oh, it's an ongoing exam service, paid $4,000 to that practice. If I see concierge, nope. If I see DPC, nope. But if I see routine exam or I see physician exam, whether needed or not, yep, funded. So that it's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. And do you have to charge plans? No, you don't. I don't care if you charge plans. Never charge a plan again. I know they hurt you. They're terrible. I don't think they're great. I don't love plans, but to me, it's just money. So the way I put it to clients is it's about $20,000 to $80,000 in a yellow bag, and you were beaten about the head and shoulders and tortured with a yellow bag. And so now I'm coming to you with a yellow bag with about $20,000 to $80,000. And I'm saying, do you want it? Some of you are going to go, hell no, that's a yellow bag. I'm never going to do business with a yellow bag again. I don't blame you. Okay. But just understand it's money. It's just money. So you can do the practice of your dreams. You can make most of your money from your patients directly. You can do care the way you want to. You're not controlled by insurance. You don't care if they downcode. You don't care about anything about them. You don't care if they kick you out of network. You don't care. They're not, it's just 20 to 80 grand. So it's just a dry-eyed calculation. Do you want that money or not? If you have all the money in the world, don't take it. If you have a real problem with yellow bags and you're not going to be able to sleep at night, don't take it. If you can get over that, take it. The end.
Well, we've covered a lot today, and I still have 4 quick questions for you.
Okay,
The next one, then I have no patients. I'm coming out of a hospital. I have no panel. What do I do? Is this an option for me?
It is an option. Just start. What you don't understand is that you are the product. By you simply starting and doing it with a small number of people, it will grow. It's like a viral infection. You just need to have enough viral infection to get that viral infection going. All practices in America that are cash practices are only grown from one place only, word of mouth. Okay.
And I would also say this, if you want to create a loyal audience, create a remarkable experience from A to Z. That starts with your phone tree. It starts with, I remember it was a doctor in Key West, and he might be listening. He's a fun guy. I love him. And he said, Michael, I took your dumb idea of putting umbrellas next to my front door because it rains all the time here in Key West, right? And he's like, I thought it was a dumb idea. And I was like, did you try it? He's like, that dumb idea worked. My patients love it, and they even sometimes bring those umbrellas back.
I think that's great. But
you get
do it.
small
I have
and
had plenty of
personal.
side gig startups, Michael, and they all start with 0. And I have had some of them full within a month. I'm being honest.
Wow.
So
That's awesome.
It can have, I'm not guaranteeing that, but it could take 3 years. It could depend on you, but start. Okay. Next question.
Do you help with valuations, and what's your thoughts or mistakes people have made on overvaluing their practice or getting it ready to sell to private equity, or private equity wants a little taste of my practice? Um, that's more of a private individual conversation they need to have with you or a professional, I would say. But give us your thoughts on what's happening in those two spaces.
I've had a couple practices bought for 10 million. So I've had experience with these transactions. Okay. So everything we've talked about is what you should do, first of all, number one. In other words, if you want to set yourself up for that possibility, you should do everything we've talked about. Okay. That's for starters. Then, when a practice is purchased by private equity, I'm going to tell you this, and it's the God's honest truth. They know nothing about this space. They really don't. They have far less insight than you think they do. They are only counting numbers. Okay. So they're looking at your gross revenue. They're looking at your net. They firmly believe they can do better than you can. So they're mostly focused on your gross. But they're interested in your net. And they're looking at an income stream. And that is it. The end. So in M&A transactions of any kind, whether it's a medical practice or a manufacturing plant or a gas station, it doesn't matter. It's math. Okay. So what is the gross revenue? And then it's going to be a multiple of that is going to be the valuation. And that multiple is going to be based on factors, and they are subjective. We could talk about EBITDA. We'll do it another time. But, at this point, just think of it this way. Your practice is probably worth about 6 to 12 times gross revenue, give or take, depending on how great your practice is.
All right. That helps. Finally,
Oh, by the way,
book are you-
gross monthly. So 1 year of gross would be 12. So I'm talking about valuation as a function of a multiple of months. So, and I'm using very rough numbers, and some practices are bought for far more than that. But in business, this is kind of the way we think. It's about, and a very good business is worth a year of gross. And then if you're going to get me past a year of gross, there's got to be a good reason. There's something going on. It's super attractive. It's got IP. It's in a great location or something. So anyway, I wanted to make that clear.
Well, that does help. And our final two questions for you are questions we ask of everybody. What's on your nightstand right now as far as books, or in your Audible playlist, or what are you reading? What book do maybe you give away the most that you think that we're about to put out our summer reading list?
So this is a book on Raja Yoga. I'm a yoga teacher, and I was trained in Kundalini Yoga. And then I became a little disaffected with the story of it. The HBO Max series Breath of Fire got to me. So I did some research on this, and I kind of went back to the roots of it, and I'm building, what I believe in. So I've been doing research on Raja Yoga. So these are the two books on my playlist. I just finished a book called The Apothecary's Wife, and I was attracted to that book because it talked about the commoditization of healthcare. So I thought, oh, wow, I talk about this all the time because I tell people, don't commodify healthcare. Don't be a hot dog. Don't do fee for service. That's commoditizing healthcare. So this book was very interesting, Michael. It talked about the history of how pharmaceutical business started. And it's in England, and it's in the 16 and 1700s. And it talks about how medicine shifted from a historical study that was often mastered by the wife of the house. And it was considered part of domestic duties to grow herbs, to grow plants, to know, medicinal remedies, and to give them freely to family and friends. And the book is about the transition from that more, dare I say, feminine. I mean, not to get weird, but that approach to it became masculine, which again, not to get weird about it, that guys are good, women aren't all good, but it became a different thing, and it got commoditized and priced a certain way. And it was a little bit overwritten, I wish it was a little shorter, but excellent. And by the time you get to the end of the book, you're going to have an aha moment about healthcare and pharmaceutical business and what are we doing to ourselves.
All right, two last things. We didn't really talk about the other side of the street, the guy who gets out of the Mercedes or the gal who gets out of the Mercedes to go to her practice. The bespoke side of healthcare, that's being kind of now more of a framed and defined different way, but luxury healthcare, do you
Okay.
see more do you see more transparency in the future, less transparency, more luxury care options? I mean, I look at healthcare kind of from the perspective of an airline. So the airline has foundational standards of trust that they have to build with the public.
Yeah.
So do doctors. But I can choose to fly on Spirit, or I can choose to go on Virgin Air or Delta, whatever the nice one is. And I think that they all have value.
Sure.
But what's your thoughts on the luxury side of things? And then also from the marketing perspective of, we see a lot of doctors market themselves as to their patients when they're first starting out, or even if they're experienced, to say, here's how difficult it is to see patients today, especially with the media. And here's how tough it is to be a doctor. It just makes, from a marketing PR perspective, I don't want to join that practice. It just makes the doctors look out of touch. So
Okay.
I'm
Let
throwing
me
a
hit this.
grenade into your room.
Boom. Here we go. I'm going to try to answer this before the grenade goes off. Okay. So number one, bespoke healthcare will continue to grow because as we look at the world, we have a growing income disparity occurring, which means a smaller number of people have an immense amount of capital and revenue and liquidity. So it's just economics. So as that group becomes wealthier and wealthier, that group will more and more prevalently subscribe to what we would call bespoke healthcare. So that marketplace is going to be solid as a rock on an ongoing basis, basically forever. Okay, in my opinion. All right. So that's one answer to one part of that question. And then the question though is, well, what is it? And is it for me, or should I do that? This gets back to what we've been saying. You got to know who you are. Who do you want to work with? If you want to work with those folks, they're going to pay you. Okay. And if that makes you happy, do it. If it doesn't make you happy, don't do it. And then I tell people that the difference between a $40,000 Mayo longevity membership and my clients in Riverside, California, who are like a former Stanford cardiologist and an integrative doctor, husband-wife team, there is literally no difference between what those folks are doing for $6,000 and Mayo does for 40. Do not for a moment think that the price is indicative of value. It's not. It's what you decided to charge and what your tolerance is. What marketplace do you want to be in? So try to think of pricing as, where do I want to be? It's not actually the true value, because I really think my clients selling for 6 are providing a product worth 40 to some people. But it's just a matter of, who do you want to work with? Who do you want to be friends with? Who do you want to be with 300 of for the rest of the next 10 years? And if you like those folks in the private jet, they'll hang out with you and pay you. It's fine. If that kind of disgusts you, that's not attractive to you, you don't got to do that. You can be over here. And I highly recommend, if you're over here with the people, make sure your practice model is employer fundable, because that gives you the opportunity to let the employer pay 100% of your fees. So if you want to do equity, and I hope you do, yay for you. And I like you over here need to do that. You need to make it employer fundable or pre-tax funds fundable to make it as affordable as possible to the most amount of people.
Well, and I love what, we've covered a lot. And our final question for you, before I get into that question, is, when you become small and personal as a physician, you become memorable. And then when that memory becomes something I want to talk about as a patient, as your patient, that's how your word of mouth spreads like wildfire. And I love what I think it was either Ritz-Carlton CEO or the Chick-fil-A CEO said, a raving fan, which would be a patient, right, does, from their perspective, is someone who does 3 things. They pay full price, they visit more often, and they tell others about it. And I love that kind of mindset, because it really is what healthcare is trying to do. It's what every doctor is trying to do. And I've probably interviewed hundreds of doctors over the years, and I've only had two say, well, I want to treat I want to treat everybody. And it's like, no, most of the physicians I ask, I say, who's your target audience? Like, who do you really love to treat and see? And she's like, I love the 35 to 55-year-old women with diabetes, right? Like, that's my wheelhouse. Or, other, like, they know exactly who their target audience is. And so, again, you should never have to apologize for your price. It's just not for that patient. And that's
Right.
okay. Our final question for Jim, and we'll put all the links on how to connect with Jim in the show notes below. Our final question for you is, Jim, what do you want to be known for?
Well, when I went into the space 15 years ago, I wanted to improve U.S. healthcare. When I did preparation for my first presentation on this 15 years ago, and I did my research on cash healthcare in America, I came to all the conclusions I hold today instinctively. One, our system is really poorly designed. It's not a good design. And I'm not going to apply a moral, forget morality for a second. It's just bad business, okay? Like, it's bad business to have 100 million Americans in debt, because that means they can't buy my product, okay? So we don't need to get all moralistic about it. You can if you want, but our current system is incredibly bad for our GDP, and it's bad for our wealth, and it's bad for wealth generation. So what I would want to be known for is for pointing a way to figuring out how to take these pieces, these broken pieces, and assemble something uniquely American that solves the problem.
Wow, I love that. Well, our guest today has been Jim Eischen. He's with Eischen Law Offices. He's a knowledgeable expert in the space of helping doctors. So if you have questions, you have comments, you have just an idea, big idea, that you're like, I have a mission and vision for healthcare, could be and should be, Jim is a wonderful resource. One of the most open-minded individuals in the routine care space. And I can't wait to learn and hear more. And we'll see you this October.
I like hot dogs.
I like hot dogs too, and I also like steak. So does that make me a bad person? No. And as my dad would say, well, it doesn't make you a vegan, Mike. So, but he's a cattle farmer. So there you are. We'll see you in October, Jim, and we'll put the show notes in the links below, and we'll let everybody go. Have a wonderful day, and we'll catch you later.
Thank you very much, Michael. Pleasure.